So we're now just going to look at a few of the homework problems. Our first problem says 8 times the quantity 4x plus 8 is equal to 11 minus the quantity x plus 2, and we want to solve the equation for x. So we're going to begin by distributing this 8 throughout this parenthesis. And so I'm going to multiply 8 times 4x, and that's going to give me 32x. I'm going to multiply 8 times 8, and that's going to give me positive 64. And then I'm going to rewrite the rest of the problem until I get right here, and then I'm going to do the same sort of thing. I'm going to distribute this negative through this set of parentheses. So a negative times x is going to be a negative x, and a negative times a 2 is going to be a negative 2. Okay, once that's done, the parentheses are cleared. The next thing that we want to do is we want to go and combine like terms. So there's nothing that I can really combine on the left, but on the right, notice I have an 11 and also a negative 2, which is going to combine 11 minus 2 is 9. And then we have a minus x. All right, our next step is to get the x's on one side of the equation and our numbers on the other side of the equation. So we're going to start moving things around. I'm going to start by adding an x to both sides of the equation. So 32 and 1 make 33x. We're just going to drop our 64 down. And we have a 9, and then this minus x and this plus x cancel out. Remember, your goal is to get everything that has an x on one side and everything that doesn't on the other. So the next thing I need to move is this 64, and I'm going to subtract it off. So that's going to give me 33x. The 64 and the minus 64 is going to cancel, and 9 minus 64 is going to give me, and you can plug that in your calculator if you need to, 9 minus 64 is going to give me negative 55. All right, and then the last thing that we need to do is we need to get x by itself. So we have the x multiplied by the 33. To undo that, we're going to divide both sides by 33. And so for our final answer, we're going to have negative 55 over 33. And that fraction is reducible by 11 on both the top and the bottom. So I can divide the top by 11, and I can divide the bottom by 11. That's going to give me negative 5 over positive 3. And remember that these are checkable simply by taking your negative 5/3 and plugging into your equation. Okay, so for our next example, we have a linear equation that has a fraction in it. So if you look at your denominators, you have a denominator of 6 and also a denominator of 3. And what you need to do is you need to find the least common multiple for those two denominators. And so what you might do is come off to the side somewhere and start writing down some multiples of 3 and some multiples of 6. So for 3, you'd have 3, 6, 9, 12, and so forth. And for 6, you'd have 6, 12, 18, and 24. And what you're looking for is the smallest thing that appears in both lists, which would be this 6. So once you find that least common multiple, then what you can do is you can multiply each fraction in this problem by that number. And so I'm going to take just a second and kind of set it up. So I'm going to multiply 6 times 5 over 6x. And I'm going to multiply 6 times 3x. And I'm going to multiply 6 times 8/3. And I'm going to multiply 6 times 5/3. And so when we go now to look at what cancels, we note that this 6 and this 6 cancel, which is going to leave me just a 5x. Here we have 6 times 3 is 18x. Here we have 6 times 8 is 48 over 3. And 48 over 3 is going to end up, if you put that in your calculator, you'll see that that's 16. So I'm going to go ahead and write that as 16. And here we have 6 times 5 is 30 over 3. And 30 over 3 is 10. Okay, now again, now that the fractions are gone, we just are left with the linear equation that we want to solve. So we're going to combine like terms. I have a 5x and a negative 18x. So 5 minus 18 is going to give me negative 13x. And then our goal becomes to get the x's on one side of the equation and the numbers on the other. So I'm going to subtract this 16 off. It's going to give me negative 13x is equal to negative 6. And our last step will be to divide both sides by negative 13. And so our final answer will be negative 6 over negative 13. And remember that your negatives will cancel. So you'll have 6 over 13. And again, you can check it by plugging that into your original equation for x. Okay, so the next question that we're going to look at also has a fraction, but it also is going to need the distributive property. And so we want to look at how this plays out for both of those things. So I think the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and distribute this 1 over 9 to both of those terms inside the parentheses. So when I multiply 1 over 9 times 5t, remember that 5t is like over 1. So 1 times 5t is 5t. And 9 times 1 is 9. And then we're going to do the same thing for the second part. So we're going to have this 5 over 1. So 1 times 5 is 5. And 9 times 1 is 9. And then I'm going to leave the second part alone. Okay, so now we notice that our denominators are 9 and 18. Remember that you want to multiply by the least common multiple of those denominators. And so you can write out some multiples of 9, and you can write out some multiples of 18. That would be 36. And remember that you're looking for the smallest thing that is in both lists. And so we're going to multiply every term by 18. And so again, I'm going to take just a second and set this thing up. I'm going to multiply 18 by each of the fractions in the problem. Okay, so now as we start to do it, we're going to first do 18 times 5, which is going to give me 90t on the top. And that 18 is over 1, so 1 times 9 is 9. 18 times 5 again is going to be 90 over 9. And then on the right-hand side, the 18s are going to cancel out. And so that is going to leave me with t plus 5. All right, let's look at what we've got here. 90 divided by 9 is going to be 10t. 90 divided by 9 again is 10. And now that we have a regular linear equation with no fractions, our goal is to get t by itself on one side and everything that doesn't have a t on the other side. And so I'm going to begin by subtracting a t off of both sides of the equation. It's going to give me 9t minus 10 is equal to 5. Then I'm going to move the 10, so I'm going to add 10 to both sides, which gives me 9t is equal to 15. And my last step, to get t by itself, I need to divide by 9. And so my t value is going to be 15 over 9, which will reduce, each of those is divisible by 3, so this will reduce to 5 over 3.